Motion be agreed to. The Honourable Enoch King.
Mr Speaker, I would have expected cooperation by the Parliament on this bill because it was an inadvertent error made at the time that the bill was passed. It wasn't something that was decided by the Parliament. In fact, it was an unintended error made by the Parliament, by all parties in this House. And the reason I can say that is because this is one piece of legislation. In fact, probably the only piece of legislation I can think of where all parties got to sit around the table to discuss it over many, many months, to go over every detail that we could on this bill. And as Heather Roy pointed out when she spoke, that all parties were involved and were pleased to be involved to get the best legislation that we could. And I do accept the comments made by Charles Chauvel earlier, not in this debate, but he said it before, that we need to look at how errors are made and try to minimise them. But I think the Minister has pointed out, in a bill that went through a very long process, which did involve the Maori Party and the Green Party, a bill that was consulted on into the wider public, including Maori in the wider public, that went to our best legal brains, still at the end of the day, we have found two inadvertent errors in it. And I think that is because we are human. We don't know everything, and sometimes errors are made. And that is why I would have expected cooperation on this bill, and I would have expected it under urgency when I think Leanne Dalziel set out very clearly why you would need to do it under urgency. And I can say that Leanne Dalziel is a person who looks very carefully at all legislation, looks very carefully at human rights issues, and gives very good advice on it. And she could see that there was a need for us to do this under urgency. I'm not in favour of urgency on bills that are not urgent, and the government has taken a whipping on that from other parties in this House. But let's face up to it. When there is an issue that requires urgency, then you would expect that there would be the best cooperation possible on it. I too was very surprised by the comments from the Maori Party, Rahui Kātani, because I could not detect a conspiracy in this bill, and I was surprised that the Maori Party had had it for 10 days and then said it was a conspiracy, and the member said it came under plain cover. I presume when it was given to the Maori Party, they were told what the name of the bill was, what was in the bill, what it did. So for the member to come to this House and say it was a conspiracy and came under plain cover and she didn't know anything about it seems to me to be a great surprise and in contradiction to what the Minister herself said. She also went on then to say there were better and bigger things to do on this day in New Zealand. Of course, there are better and bigger things to do every day in New Zealand than some people would think being in this Parliament. But I actually think this is an important change that needs to be made. And when we get to the committee stages, the Minister will have an opportunity to outline in greater detail why it was discovered in October last year and what process took place then before it came before this Parliament at this time. And I think that people would look forward to that explanation, and I'm sure there will be one. So I think that it is an important thing to do. There are people off already today at the tangi for Sir Paul Reeves. There will be people who are going to different functions, but we also are paid to do a job here as well, and that is what we're doing. I think there does appear to be a bit of information missing to some members. We are talking about the retaining of information for young people who have been before the court and a charge was proved. We're not talking about the innocent person, young person that hasn't done anything. We're talking about a young person who has been before the youth court and a charge has been proved. And they were subjected to a finding or an order by the youth court. And those findings, which we can go into later when we get to that clause, are set out in the Children, Young Persons and Their Family Act. And they can be many and varied. They can include, for example, where restitution's been required to be paid to the victim of a crime. So we're not talking about some idea that we're going to pick up young Maori or Pacific people off the street and hold information for when they've done nothing. We're talking about young people who have been before the youth court, a charge has been proved, and they were subject to a finding. And I think that Chris Hipkins gave an extremely good example, and I'd be interested in why the member who's interjecting now would not think this is appropriate to hold this information. The young person in Upper Hutt, and it's happened in my own electorate, and I'm sure it's happened in many other people's electorate, who have gone out and they have etched on the windows of businesses within the business community. You cannot rub it off. You've ruined an entire plate glass window by the etching. It is thousands of dollars. That young person has been detected. They've been picked up. They have appeared before the youth court, and a finding has been made. An order has been given. And when that order was given under the old Act, they could retain their photographs and fingerprints because they had offended. And so when the next time they did it, there was the ability to ensure the right person was charged with the crime that they commit. And so I cannot, for the life of me, understand why we would not want to continue to hold that information, because there's a very important point here. Keith Locke said, "What price justice?" And I say to Keith Locke, what price justice also for the victim? For the victim who were subjected to a young person destroying their property at the cost of thousands of dollars, who have been found to have a charge proved by the youth court, and the youth court wanted to hold, the police want to hold the information about that young person who had offended, to actually, in many areas, to help them when they re-offend, to ensure there is justice for those who have been injured in that offence. And I cannot see what is so wrong in doing that. That's what we did for decades. This was a 50-year-old bill, or a 50-year-old Act, 1958 Act, and when we finally rewrote it 50 years later, we forgot or overlooked to carry over those clauses. I also thought it was a red herring from the Maori Party to say that it was about the issue we needed to discuss was about obtaining personal information. This bill has nothing to do with obtaining information, and I'm certainly happy to debate that at a later date and do have views on how we obtain information and what information we do obtain. But this is not what this bill is about. This bill is about the retention of impersonal information on a young person who has offended, who has already appeared before the youth court. Keith Locke also said in his contribution to the first reading is that what would be one or two appeals? Well, Keith Locke would not have any idea how many appeals there would be if we did not take urgency today. He said some figure like maybe $6 million. Well, I tell you what, I'd rather spend $6 million in helping young people and putting in place support for young people than wasting the time of the court and wasting the time of the police rehearing a case where the youth court had already made a finding on that young person, but it's reopened on a technicality. You see, there is a cost to justice, but there are two sides to that. Many sides, in fact. The cost to police time, the cost to court time, the cost to the victims of the person who was offended against. And sometimes I think it's important to try and weigh them all up and look at where the balance is. And we believe on this side of the House it was not intended that we didn't carry through those clauses. It was never raised by the Greens in those discussions. It was never raised by the Maori Party in the 2 years consultation. It was an error, and it is an error that we ought to correct today as soon as possible. And I think, as Chris Hipkins said, it is in the interest of young people to do the best we can once they've appeared before the youth court, to give them an opportunity when an order is made that is diverting them away from the district court, from a major crime, give an opportunity...
I'm sorry to interrupt the honourable member. Her time has expired. Call Jackie.